Uh, Callicles, what are you doing?
Wow, Socrates, here I am. I'm stuffing my face. I'm expanding my capacity for pleasure. You know, Socrates, you're really a bore. I reckon that insatiable appetites and no conventional moral facades about fairness or virtue are the way to the good life. Why, only the other day I was having a great old time with my dear friend James Packer. Rob Harris was there too. We were dining on the most exquisite foods, followed by musical pleasure you would not believe. Rolf even got up and did his timey kangaroo down for us. You see, Socrates, the aim of the good life is to expand our desires as much as possible. Pleasure in the good consists in the process of satisfying a desire. Let me give you an example. Eating when we're hungry is more pleasurable than eating when we aren't. I haven't eaten all day, so as to expand my pleasure at eating this apple here. The same also seems true of desires that aren't related to appetite. Seeing a friend or a loved one after a long break is often more of a charged experience than seeing them after only a short break. So you see, the aim of the good life is to cultivate extreme desires and then get yourself into a social situation where you can satisfy them. The type of desire and the type of pleasure is irrelevant, just so long as it's strong. And the strong are not imposed on by the conventions of the weak. What do you reckon about that then, old squire?
Conventions of the weak. Callicles, as I have outlined in our ancient dialogue, the Gorgias, your position leads to contradictions in reasoning. And without addressing these contradictions, there will be a great discord of your very self or soul. If the pleasures that come from satisfaction of a desire are the only things that matter, and the type of desire and pleasure is irrelevant, then a man who dedicates himself to a life of scratching would surely be blessed. Scratching those itches, the coward running away from the battlefield, is an exemplar of the good life according to your hedonistic position. Similarly, I have heard reports about this pleasure-seeking Rolf Harris, friend of yours that you claim to have met up with the other day. Do you really wish to advocate such lives as exemplars of the good life?
Well, maybe not.
Then I'm afraid you maintain a contradicting position. Either you reverse your position to address these contradictions, or drop this whole nonsense of pleasure and good being equal and one and the same thing.
You seem to have got me there, Socrates, as you did in the Gorgias. But over the last couple of thousand years, I've been thinking about this position, and I've sketched out some adjustments which may mean that I no longer lead to a contradiction.
Okay, I'm always open for ideas and to build upon our previous ideas and developments in philosophy, so let me hear that, Callicles.
Okay, so now let me be clear. This is not a position that I maintain in the Gorgias, so it would be best if DECV students don't quote me on this one. But this could be an area for evaluations or discussion, and discussions on pleasure and the good.
Yes, I'm all ears, Callicles. Tell me more.
Okay, well, I propose that those pleasures which are more deeply satisfying and offer more pleasure over a longer period of time are better than those which are only superficially satisfying and don't last long. Just as one often sacrifices a short-term pleasure in the interests of a longer-term one, for example, by studying for exams instead of watching telly, in order to increase one's chances of obtaining a satisfying career.
That's interesting.
You see, you're not the only philosopher, Socrates, and people have been thinking about these questions since your death.
My vanity has been exploited there.
An area of philosophy called utilitarianism proposes something similar to the position that I've just outlined, so I can't take total credit. But what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, can we really distinguish between pleasures without the notion of the good? Is, for example, eudaimonia comparable enough to the pleasures of eating that we can call both examples of pleasure? Or is there some difference between the two that is qualitative and not more or less quantitative? I think there could be a difference in the kind of things being compared. Eudaimonia and eating, say, a chocolate or an apple, rather than a difference of degree. What I mean there is the things being compared here that you talk about, your distinction between high and low pleasures, is really, it's really just a difference of degree.
Difference of degree, you think?
I ask you this question, Callicles. What criteria are you using to make this distinction between long-lasting pleasures and superficial, fleeting pleasures?
Well, it's the quality of the pleasure. Some pleasures are longer lasting, like the satisfaction that an Athenian leader takes in crushing the Spartans or the Persians. And some are quite brief, like the pleasure in eating an apple, for instance.
Okay, well, how are you making this distinction? It seems as though you misunderstand, Callicles. It is the good, ultimately, that you are just making appeals to the good when you say high pleasures. I feel as though your new theory does not illuminate much and merely pushes back the chain of justification. It begs the question, what is the basis of this criteria that you are using to make this distinction between high pleasures and low pleasures? When you bring in an idea of high pleasures, you really merely mean the good. The good is the ultimate basis for your judgments here.
But we all know what a good pleasure is, don't we? It's a bad pleasure. I mean, you don't need a theory here, you just know.
You know? In what way? What do you mean?
Well, if I asked you, is, it a higher pleasure to listen to a beautiful piece of music? Which is the higher pleasure, listening to a beautiful piece of music or having an icy pole?
I'd say listening to a beautiful piece of music would be the higher pleasure there.
Do you really need to have a theory for why that's so? Or, I mean, don't we just know that some pleasures are better than others?
Yes, we need a theory, of course, so, Callicles. That's the idea of philosophy. Must I remind you of my position previously put forward in the Gorgias, where I said that the good and the bad are opposites. Opposites cannot coexist and must be alternate. Pleasure and pain can coexist, like when I'm drinking and thirsty, I'm both in a state of pleasure and a state of pain. And since pleasure and pain are not opposites, they are neither good nor bad. Thus, pleasure is not the same as the good. The possession of good qualities is what makes a person good. For example, possessing good looks makes one good looking. Or to refer more particularly to myself, Socrates, possession of ugly looks makes one look pretty ugly. If pleasure is the same as the good, possessing pleasure should make one a good person. But according to this, we would have to accept that the coward and the catamite are exemplars, and even your friend Rolf Harris are exemplars of the good. In contemporary contexts, such people, as I mentioned before, as Rolf Harris or James Packer, are modern examples of the good life, which you would... Sorry.
I was going to say, I think you're a bit hard on yourself, Socrates. Compared to James Packer, you're a real oil painting. But sorry, continue.
Therefore, the good is not the same as pleasure. Since you should not hold contradictory beliefs, for such a state would create a discord of your soul, Callicles, you should either revise your argument to maintain consistency or drop your argument altogether.
Socrates, geez, dealing with you does my head in. It's certainly not a pleasure. I think it's the opposite of pleasure, whatever that is, if it's not pain. I don't know. It just seems to me that, we all know what a good pleasure is.
Furthermore, Callicles, the good person should devote themselves to making others good and bettering their community. They should make people ordered, disciplined, temperate, not indulgent like Rolf Harris and James Packer's consumerism. And this will lead to a harmonious and organised universe. Callicles, you need to stay away from the likes of those friends of yours. This James Packer and Rolf Harris man do not seem to understand order and self-discipline. You need to live in harmony with the universe. As the universe is organised with rules of gravity and celestial orbits, so should the self be organised. And who is it that you speak, and who is it that it was speaking about this utilitarian philosophy anyway?
Look, I think that, I agree with you that it's good to be disciplined and maybe a little bit temperate sometimes, but I don't think you need to have an argument to do it. I think you just learn how to do it. And I actually hang around with Rolf and James really does help me to see, the dangers that there are to excessive use of pleasure. So they're useful examples. I don't need an argument. I just need to learn from other people by seeing what they do and deciding whether or not I should follow them.
This seems to be bringing up the ideas of philosophy versus rhetoric. I'm saying philosophy, it's seeking of truth. What better way to conduct yourself and to seek the good life than holding a consistent position and maintaining consistency and seeking reason and wisdom.
Well, look, there's truth, like seeking true propositions, true statements, and there's seeking truth as in being a true person.
Right.
And I don't know that
So a sense
standing around arguing and looking for true statements is really going to help you to be a true person, a person that's,
But I'm hearing what you're saying there, a true person is some type of authentic person, a person that's true to themselves.
Exactly, Socrates, you're learning.
In order to be true to yourself, you would need to maintain a consistent position. Otherwise, there would be a discord.
No, you just develop your ability to satisfy your desires. Remaining true to yourself means remaining true to your desires. Maybe developing them, but, not arguing about them interminably.
What type of desires? We've already seen that pleasure and the good aren't equal. If I just seek to maintain and fill up
Socrates.
my desires, I would constantly be filling up my cup. Like a leaking cup would be. All the desires, it seems like an endless effort. I would rather have just a nice cup of coffee, cup of tea maybe.
Well, that's why I was saying before, it's about the process of satisfying desire. So it's not just, I'm not saying, the good life is just satisfying desire. I'm saying the good life is, developing exquisite desires and getting oneself into a social situation where one can satisfy them, in a delightful way, not in a kind of just in a peak sort of a way.
So maybe you're in agreement there in the sense that you're just confusing desires and pleasure with the word good. Why do we use these words anyway, like good and happiness, if it's all just about pleasure and satisfying desire? Why not say, I'm seeking pleasure and leave it at that? Why use the term or the word good? What use would it have? Let's finish there, I think.
Okay. Well, it's always a great joy to leave your company, Socrates.
And likewise, Callicles. Although I disagree with you most of the time, I admire your capacity to engage in argumentative and philosophical discussion.
Bah!